Wondering if this movie is worth your time? Let's find out. Hello Fanatics, I'm Dylan Phillips, and this is the Film Fanatic Review bringing you Wonder Woman, starring Gal Gadot, Chris Pine, and Robin Wright. First, we'll tell you what the movie is about and our initial thoughts, then some spoiler-free likes and dislikes. We'll finish up with our spoiler-heavy thoughts on this film, and our final word. Wonder Woman follows the story of Diana, Princess of the Amazons, who leaves her home to help fight a war to end all wars, where she discovers her full powers and destiny. Overall, we can breathe a little easier now. This film is definitely the best DCEU film to date, and I think it's probably my favorite DC film ever. For what I liked about this film, I have to start off by saying that I absolutely loved Gal Gadot in this film. She is to Wonder Woman what Robert Downey Jr. is to Tony Stark, or Harrison Ford is to Indiana Jones. I can't see anybody else playing this role, and she definitely defined it as her own. The type of flawed innocence that she brings to Diana, while also having the badass warrior princess there, is a great combination, and it's the depth of this character that we saw from this performance that transcends any other type of superhero that we've seen so far on screen. Aside from Gadot, we had a very gripping performance from Chris Pine as love interest and spy Steve Trevor. As much as this is a Wonder Woman film, it is very much a Steve Trevor film as well, as we do follow his storyline very prominently throughout this film. And what I didn't expect to enjoy so much in this movie was the chemistry between Gadot and Pine and their romantic subplot. I didn't think that because it was a superhero movie that it was going to be a cheesy romantic subplot and it was going to be kind of forced in there, and this one actually went above what I expected. It was much better than my favorite one, which is Steve Rogers and Agent Carter. And so to have that in this movie, to have something with such depth where there were big moments, but there were also the small moments, I didn't expect that from this superhero movie. Beyond the two leads, I found that there was great cast chemistry and performances by both the group of Amazons and the World War I squad. Both of them just seemed to mesh very nicely, especially with the leads. The film had some outstanding visuals, particularly when you go from the bright Amazon world to the dull and gritty world of World War I London, and it definitely showed the influence of Zack Snyder on this film. The score is very well done, with a very badass theme for Wonder Woman that I definitely want to have in my library. But the thing that I enjoyed most about this film was definitely the story. Although it was an origin that definitely took parts of what you would see in Thor and Captain America and kind of blended them, it did so much more than that. It had a lot of comedic moments that felt right, it had a lot of witty banter, it had great dialogue, it had action sequences, it had the romantic subplot that didn't feel forced, and aside from Logan, I haven't seen a superhero movie that has this much depth to it. It's definitely a movie that is not only for the superhero fans, it is for people beyond that. Any fans of war, any fans of war dramas, any fans of action movies. This movie is not defined by its superhero niche. As for what I disliked, I will say that the pacing was a little bit off in the middle of the film, although this film doesn't feel as long as its runtime. And they certainly overuse the slow-mo action sequences in this film. I can understand using it sometimes, but it got a little overplayed. My biggest quip is definitely with the villain characters in this film. Again, another superhero movie that doesn't have great memorable villains. There were a couple in this one and I had problems with each of them, so I'll explain that more in the spoiler section. And that's where I'll end our spoiler-free thoughts on this film. If you want to hear our final word or rating of this film, pause now and click the link in the description, because now it's time for spoilers. First off, I gotta talk about the slow-mo. I don't understand why all these modern filmmakers have to create these action sequences in slow-mo. I mean, some of the greatest action sequences, like in Lord of the Rings, were not in slow-mo, and I would go back and watch those battle sequences over and over again. The choreography, the fight scenes are just so enamoring. And yet, this movie feels like every single action sequence that you get into, 50% of it, at least, has to be in slow-mo. And I gotta admit, it's a little bit cool to see Wonder Woman slowing down kind of time around her because she's, more powerful than the human characters around her. But it gets a little bit overplayed and eventually boring. Now I'm gonna talk about the villain characters. The first one I had a problem with was the German general. I think that it's 2017, and therefore when you're watching a movie where it's going to be about World War I or World War II, and you have German characters, you should have German actors. I don't care if it's made by Hollywood. I think if you have German characters, German actors. French characters, French actors. There was a scene in the movie where Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman is talking to a woman in the trenches, and she's telling her that her city has been basically enslaved. And when they're talking to each other, they're speaking in a foreign language, and there's some subtitles on screen. Now, I can understand how that could get a little bit boring with American audiences watching the German characters throughout the movie constantly speaking German to each other. However, I think that how you remedy this is you do put German actors in those roles, and if there's two German characters on screen, have them speak English to each other so that we can understand them while we're watching the movie. However, if there's German characters on screen with Americans, have them speak German, and have the Americans attempt to speak German. And that way we can show that there's actually some diversity in Hollywood. I thought that Danny Huston was kind of good in the role. However, if you're gonna get a German actor, I'm just gonna go out and say, stereotype, let's do Christoph Waltz. The villain that I had the most problem with was definitely Ares. I know he's supposed to kind of hide in plain sight, and he's someone that you're not supposed to suspect. And David Thewlis is a great actor. I loved him in Harry Potter, I loved him in Kingdom of Heaven. However, at the same time, I just don't like him in this role. I think he's a little bit too old for it. He just doesn't seem to fit the mold for Ares, and I had to go back and watch this movie a second time to kind of understand why I didn't like him, and all I could think about when I was watching it the second time is, wow, you know who would be good in this role? Ewan McGregor. I could now probably gush for hours about all the things I loved about this movie, like how there were parallels between Steve Trevor's fish out of water scenario on the island as Diana's fish out of water scenario in London, or how they actually handled the origin story in this one and showing her backstory. But instead, I'm just going to talk about a few scenes that I loved. Diana's training at the beginning of the movie definitely gives us a lot of insight into her backstory and how she becomes the badass warrior that she is. However, the best scene in that origin story to me is definitely the beach fight scene, when you have Hippolyta just mowing down guys with her bow and arrow, and that's where she first meets Steve Trevor. You have the dramatic death scene, and everything that just happened in that fight scene ramped up everything that you had seen in the movie so far and went, oh shit, stuff is about to happen. I also really like the scene where Diana is in the city and she's just defending the city and taking out everything, and then just flips a tank over. And then at the end of that, where she jumps off of the piece of the tank and just completely demolishes the church. It shows just how much of a wonder she is. However, two parts of this film definitely stood out to me. One was very action-oriented, and the other one was definitely heartfelt. The action-oriented part was where Diana comes out of the trenches into no man's land and just decides to waltz over towards the German lines. And as she's doing that, you can just see how invulnerable she is, how she can just deflect bullets, and heck, she even takes a barrage of bullets from tons of machine guns on her shield, and Steve and the guys finally go, hey, we need to help her. And that entire action sequence, it doesn't matter that there wasn't any fist fighting in that scene, but the actual just her going up there and showing how strong she is, that scene was everything that I didn't know I wanted from a Wonder Woman movie. The other scenes that I really liked are, again, not one scene, but a storyline, and that was the subplot with Steve Trevor and Diana Prince. I didn't think that I would enjoy that as much as I did in this movie, but it was the heartfelt small moments, and the one that definitely stood out to me, aside from, the end one that they showed twice, and she gets her hearing back the second time, and she hears that he loves her. The second one, to me, which is definitely the standout, is where after they've rescued the village, they're standing around and he decides that he's gonna show her how to dance. And they start dancing and there's snow, and she asks him, what do people do if there's no fighting? And he explains, and it's just those moments where they're looking at each other. You can see the chemistry, not only between the characters, but between the actors. And it's a shame that he's gonna be gone in the next movie, because the chemistry between these two, I would have loved to see more of these two together. So, with the thoughts heard, here's our final word. Wonder Woman is an action-packed superhero film with a lot more emotional depth than others in the genre. With Gal Gadot's charismatic performance, great chemistry in the cast, and a phenomenal origin story, this film is a wonder to behold. This film is not only the one that DC needed, but definitely the one that DC fans deserved. So I'm gonna give Wonder Woman a 9. Thanks everybody for watching our review. Sorry it's a bit late, but I had to go back and watch it a second time to decide definitively that this is my favorite DC film. Are you planning on seeing Wonder Woman? Or if you've already seen it, do you have something to add? Does this film top your list of DC films? Let us know in the comments below. I'm Dylan Phillips, and this has been the Film Fanatic Review. If you liked this video and you want to see more, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Check out our latest Fanatic 5 video where we discuss the top Johnny Depp roles. Don't forget to follow us on our social media. Until next time, Fanatics, keep it real.